Welcome, dear viewers, to a literary journey that transcends time. Today we will dive into the murky waters of a story that sprouted from rejected soil, where a woman transformed scorn into dignity, abandonment into hope. This is the saga of Rosa Benedita Silva, a soul who discovered that even the land nobody wanted could blossom into a garden. In 1884, in the interior of São Paulo, a cruel inheritance transformed into the seed of freedom. When the brothers laughed at the swampy land that fell to Rosa, they didn't know they were witnessing the birth of an empire built by feminine hands and ancestral courage. At the margins of contempt, where only cattails and laments grew, would sprout the most beautiful revenge, prosperity conquered with dignity. From where are you watching us? Share in the comments your city, for every land has its own story of overcoming. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your like so that more people can discover these stories that nourish the soul. Year 1884. Village of São Bento do Sapucaí, São Paulo. In the final times of the empire, when coffee reigned and abolition whispered in the winds of change, January 1884 arrived carrying the weight of mourning like a heavy cloud over the Silva plantation. Colonel Inácio Silva had departed after 2 years of agony, leaving behind the echo of coughs that still resonated through the corridors of the main house. Rosa Benedita Silva, at 34 years old, remained standing before her father's coffin, her calloused hands intertwined over her faded black dress. Around her, 6 brothers whispered about lands and wills, like vultures measuring carrion. The reading of the will took place on a February morning, when rain drummed on the tiles like impatient fingers. Rosa had seated herself at the margin, as always, watching Joaquim preside over the ceremony with the arrogance of a firstborn. "To my daughter Rosa Benedita," the notary's voice cut through the thick air, "I bequeath the 12 alqueires known as the Sachi Swamp." The silence that followed was broken by laughter. Isabel, Joaquim's wife, covered her face with her feathered fan. "Are you going to raise frogs, Rosa?" The brothers received the best lands: coffee valleys, high pastures, forest with noble timber. To her had fallen the rejected, the swampy, where only giant cattails grew among muddy waters. Rosa rose with the same silent dignity that had accompanied her since childhood. There were no tears in her brown eyes, only a resolution that none of those present knew how to interpret. What none of them imagined is that seeds of greatness germinate precisely in the land that everyone despises. 3 days after the humiliation, Rosa carried only a bundle, her mother's sewing machine, and an iron determination. The trail wound between whispering bamboo until reaching the swamp that now belonged to her. It was there, where the path forked, that she encountered Benedito. He was sitting on a fallen log, contemplating the aquatic vegetation with eyes that hold stories. His graying hair contrasted with skin still strong, marked by decades of sun and labor. "You are the Colonel's daughter." It was not a question, but recognition. Rosa nodded, studying this man who had known slavery and now breathed free air thanks to the law of sexagenarians. "This land," Benedito pointed toward the swamp, "they call it cursed, but land is not to blame for being land. It's the men who don't know how to read its secrets." The first dialogue between them was built more of gestures than words. Benedito showed her the hidden springs, the quality of the clay, the medicinal plants that grew wild. Rosa offered him work and dignified housing. "I can teach what I know about wetlands," he said, "if the lady wants to learn." "I want to," Rosa replied, and in that simple word was sealed a partnership that would change both their destinies. At nightfall, they contemplated together the 12 alqueires of water and mud. To others it was useless. To them, it was the future. Sometimes wisdom comes disguised as solitude, and fortune hides under the appearance of abandonment. The first 6 days were of frenzied construction. Rosa and Benedito raised a humble ranch with eucalyptus wood and adobe, covering it with thatch and clay tiles that she herself molded. The fired brick floor was laid square by square, each piece placed with the care of one who builds a future. The external kitchen would house the wood stove, where soon they would cook the fruits of their own land. Benedito revealed himself to be a patient teacher. He taught her to read the signs of plants: guaco for coughs, carqueja for the liver, Espinhera Santa for wounds that are slow to heal. Rosa absorbed each lesson like dry earth absorbs rain. "The wetland has its own rhythm," he explained, watching the waters that moved slowly between the cattails. "You need to know when to flood, when to drain, when to let it rest." In March, they planted 3 alqueires of native rice. Rosa learned to control the wooden gates that directed the waters, transforming the swamp into a chessboard of flooded plots. The nights were dedicated to letters. Benedito, who had learned to read and write in slavery under a benevolent overseer, had become Rosa's teacher. By the light of tallow candles, she traced words in the sand, then on paper. The first text she managed to write alone was, "Rosa Benedita Silva, owner of the Sachi swamp. Education is like water. It always finds a way to grow, even when born in the most unlikely places." June brought the first harvest. The golden grains of rice filled 3 ox carts, proving that the despised land held extraordinary fertility. Rosa established trade routes with the precision of an experienced merchant. Francisco Mendez, the village pharmacist, became a faithful buyer of the medicinal plants she cultivated. 300 reis per kilogram of dried and well-conditioned herbs. The mats and baskets woven with fibers from the swamp found market among muleteers who stopped in the village. Rosa discovered that her hands, trained in sewing, adapted perfectly to rural crafts. The raising of ducks and teals prospered in the shallow waters. In 8 months, 30 birds swam among the aquatic plants, providing eggs and meat for the table and for sale. The great discovery came by chance. While digging a ditch to drain a plot, Rosa found clay of different color and texture. Benedito examined the material with a specialist's attention. "This clay," he murmured, molding it between his fingers, "doesn't crack in strong fire. I've seen the same in the colonel's pottery." Rosa intuited that she had discovered something valuable, but kept the secret like buried treasure. The first victories accumulated like grains in the granary, each one planting seeds of greater prosperity. Fortune is not found. It is cultivated with patience, dedication, and eyes attentive to the signs that nature offers. May 1887 arrived carrying clouds of threat. Joaquim, José, and Manuel appeared at the swamp, mounted on nervous horses, bearing the same arrogance of 3 years ago on their faces. But now the landscape was different. The organized plots, the prosperous livestock, the ranch expanded into a comfortable house caused poorly concealed amazement in the 3 brothers. "Rosa," Joaquim dismounted, with the forced elegance of one trying to hide surprise, "we come to propose a family partnership." The coffee crisis had hit the highlands. Prices plummeted while Italian immigrants cheapened the labor force. The empire built with slave labor tottered on fragile foundations. "This land needs masculine protection," José gestured toward the flooded plots. "A woman alone cannot administer serious business." Rosa remained silent, observing her brothers with the same serenity with which she watched herons fishing in the swamp. Benedito maintained respectful distance but remained alert. "This land is mine by right and work," Rosa finally spoke, each word heavy as a grain of gold. "I need neither partnership nor protection." The categorical refusal echoed like a cannon shot. The 3 brothers departed, carrying in their chests a humiliation that would soon transform into revenge. Isabel spread rumors through the village. Rosa lived in concubinage with an ex-slave, practiced witchcraft, disrespected her father's memory. Some conservative merchants initiated a discreet boycott. Prosperity conquered by feminine hands always awakens in men a dangerous mixture of envy and spite. August 1887 witnessed the cruelest of battles that fought in the courts. Joaquim contested the division of the lands, alleging that their father had been influenced by his daughter's witchcraft. The hearing took place in the church of São Bento do Sapucaí, transformed into an improvised tribunal. Dr. Carlos Rodriguez Almeida, judge of law, presided over the trial that would define Rosa's future. "An unmarried woman cannot administer patrimony of this magnitude," declared Joaquim's lawyer, "especially living in a morally dubious situation with an ex-slave." Rosa had seated herself upright, wearing the best dress she possessed, navy blue with details embroidered by her own hands. Benedito remained at the back of the church, silent witness to the injustice unfolding. Francisco Mendez testified in Rosa's favor, confirming her commercial honesty and the value of the medicinal plants she supplied. Vicente Santos, a frequent passing muleteer, related the evident prosperity of the Sachi swamp. The surprise came with the testimony of Eduardo Mendez, engineer of the Sorocabana Railroad. He confirmed that Rosa's land contained refractory clay of the highest quality, in addition to lime deposits suitable for cement manufacturing. "I propose leasing for 25% of mineral profits," declared the engineer, causing astonished silence in the church. Dr. Carlos Rodriguez Almeida struck the gavel. Work legitimizes property. The petitioner remains absolute owner of her lands. Rosa left the tribunal victorious, but aware that there were enemies willing not to forget the defeat. The justice of men does not always coincide with divine justice, but sometimes the paths cross in favor of the brave. May 13th, 1888. The abolition of slavery echoed through the São Paulo fields like a bell of freedom. Benedito, at 70 years old, became officially free, choosing to adopt the Silva surname in homage to the partnership that had transformed their lives. Rosa, now 38 years old, contemplated the empire erected upon the 12 despised alqueires. 8 alqueires of rice undulated golden in the wind. 2 of cassava promised abundant flour. 1 dedicated to vegetables fed the growing community. The leasing of clay to the refractory brick factory had brought unimaginable prosperity. The corn flour mill and cassava flour press processed not only their own production, but that of neighbors who paid for the service. 6 permanent workers, including 2 Italian immigrants, found dignified and well-paid employment at the Sachi swamp. Rosa's most beloved innovation was the Sunday school for the workers' children. Every Sunday morning, 12 children learned their first letters under the shade of a yellow ipee tree planted by Benedito. Education is the only inheritance that no one can take away, Rosa repeated while watching the little ones bent over their books. Benedito, now a respected foreman, walked through the plots with the pride of an owner. His ancestral wisdom mixed with Rosa's innovation, creating agricultural methods that awakened interest from neighboring farmers. The swamp that nobody wanted had become a model of prosperity and dignity. When we plant with love and harvest with justice, the earth responds by offering abundance for all. The following years brought bitter vintage for those who had sown contempt. Joachim lost the farm to an Italian bank, taking refuge in the rum that consumed his dignity drop by drop. Jose and Antonio sold their lands for vile prices, migrating to Santos in search of work at the ports. The coffee that had enriched them had turned against them. Manuel arrived at the Sachi swamp on a winter morning in 1888, hat in hands and humility in his eyes. Rosa received him on the porch of the expanded house, observing the brother who had once laughed at her inheritance. "I need work," was all he managed to say. Rosa studied him in silence, seeing in the face marked by suffering the distant echo of the boy who had played at her side in childhood. "You can stay," she said finally. "As foreman, you'll have a house, fair salary, and respect." Pedro followed Manuel months later, accepted as administrator of the business that grew beyond Rosa's capacity to manage alone. Sebastian was the last to arrive in 1889, carrying tuberculosis in his chest that consumed him slowly. Rosa welcomed him without hesitation, caring for the sick brother during 8 months of silent agony. "You were better than all of us, sister," murmured Sebastian on an autumn afternoon, few days before departing. Rosa wept then, not for the approaching death, but for the life wasted in pride and prejudice. True forgiveness does not forget wounds, but plants flowers over the scars. 1890 brought unexpected changes. Tomás Oliveira, a Portuguese immigrant with blue eyes and skillful hands for carpentry, had arrived to work on the expansion of the Sachi swamp installations. Rosa, now 40 years old, discovered in the Portuguese a kindred soul who respected her independence without trying to dominate her. Tomás admired the woman who had transformed rejected land into a prosperous enterprise. The civil marriage took place in a simple ceremony, with Benedito serving as principal witness. Rosa kept the Silva surname, but added Oliveira as a symbol of the new life they were building together. Benedito, at 75 years old, walked more slowly through the plots, but his lucidity remained sharp as a well-sharpened sickle. He had officially adopted the Silva surname, proud of the family he had chosen. "I lived free and respected," he confided to Rosa on a golden summer afternoon. "Few men of my generation can say the same." The evening conversations between them became a sacred ritual. Benedito transmitted the last secrets about water management. Rosa planned the school that would bear his name. Time stretched generously over the Sachi swamp, allowing friendships to deepen before the inevitable departure. There are bonds that transcend blood and origin, forged in respectful coexistence and shared work. January 1891 took Benedito on a serene morning. He died sleeping after a mild pneumonia, departing like a leaf that detaches from the tree when its mission is complete. Rosa found him in the morning, his serene face turned toward the window that overlooked the prosperous plots. In his hands, a note written in his careful handwriting, "To Rosa Silva, the daughter I chose to have." The funeral gathered the entire community that had grown around the Sachi swamp. Portuguese, Italians, Brazilians of all colors paid homage to the man who had taught dignity through example. Rosa established the Professor Benedito Silva School on the highest ground of the property. There, children from throughout the region would learn their first letters under the protection of the memory of the man who had known how to transform liberation into liberation. The school was built of brick and mortar, with large windows that let in all the daylight. A bronze plaque at the entrance bore the inscription, "Education is the only wealth that multiplies when shared." 1892 brought the twins Ignazio Benedito and Anna Benedita, fruits of the mature love between Rosa and Tomas. The babies were born on a spring morning when the IP trees bloomed in yellow profusion around the house. Rosa, at 42 years old, a late but fulfilled mother, rocked her children while contemplating the transformed landscape that extended to the horizon. True masters never die completely. They live eternally in the wisdom they manage to transmit. Donna Rosa of the Swamp, thus they knew her throughout the region. The woman who had transformed flooded land into a prosperous empire had become a living legend. The original 12 alqueires expanded to 50, acquired from neighbors who respected her entrepreneurial capacity. The rice processing factory processed grains from the entire micro-region. The Professor Benedito Silva School had grown to 40 students, some coming from distant villages, to study under the direction of the teacher Rosa had hired from São Paulo. 20 families found dignified sustenance in the community that had formed around the property. Portuguese, Italians, Germans, and Brazilians coexisted harmoniously, united by respect for the employer who treated all with justice. Rosa's mornings began early, walking through the plots in the company of her small children. Ignazio Benedito and Anna Benedita, at 3 years old, already showed curiosity about the land that would be their inheritance. Tomas took care of expanding the constructions, always consulting his wife before making any important decision. The marriage, built on mutual respect, flourished like a well-tended garden. On Sunday afternoons, Rosa received visits from municipal authorities, curious farmers and journalists interested in the story of the woman who had defied social conventions. "How did you manage to transform worthless land into a prosperous enterprise?" they invariably asked. Rosa smiled, pointing toward the plots where rice undulated golden. "Land is not worthless. Worthless are the eyes that don't know how to see its possibilities. True success is not measured only by material prosperity, but by the capacity to elevate alongside us all those who accompany us." 1893 brought melancholic news. Joaquim had died in the São Paulo shelter, consumed by alcohol and bitterness. Isabel, a poor widow, wrote a letter asking for help to pay for the funeral. Rosa read the correspondence on the porch, watching the twins play in the garden that Benedito had planted. Tomas awaited her decision in respectful silence. "I will pay for the funeral," she said finally, "and offer a home to Isabel, if she wants to come." The sister-in-law who had once mocked her arrived in autumn, bringing only a suitcase and much humility. Rosa received her without mention of the past, offering housing and work in the children's school. Jose wrote from Santos telling of difficulties at the port. Rosa sent him money and an invitation to return. Antonio, more proud, never responded to the letters his sister sent him. Pedro and Manuel, now men transformed by dignified work, administered specific sectors of the enterprise. Both married young women from the region, expanding the family that grew around the Sachi swamp. The nights were dedicated to accounting books and expansion plans. Rosa had learned the principles of administration on her own, developing her own management methods that awakened interest from merchants in the capital. The mail frequently brought letters from farmers requesting consultation on wetland cultivation. Rosa answered all of them, generously sharing the knowledge that Benedito had taught her. True prosperity always finds ways to multiply, radiating benefits beyond its original borders. April 1894 brought the supreme test. A commission from the São Paulo Secretary of Agriculture arrived to evaluate the innovative methods developed at the Sachi swamp. Dr. Americo Brasiliense, secretary of the portfolio, toured the installations accompanied by agronomic engineers and journalists from the capital. Rosa personally conducted the visit, explaining each technique with scientific precision. "Donna Rosa, asked the secretary before the rice plots that extended as far as the eye could see. "Did you develop these methods alone?" "Not alone," Rosa corrected firmly. "Everything I know I learned from Benedito Silva, former slave of this property. He possessed ancestral knowledge about wetland cultivation that was never recorded in any book." The silence that followed weighed like a storm cloud. Rosa perceived that some visitors were surprised by the attribution of merit to a black man, but she remained firm in the truth. "Innovation," she continued, "consists of combining traditional wisdom with modern techniques. Benedito taught me to read the land. I learned to write about it." Dr. Americo Brasiliense smiled, recognizing the moral courage of the woman who did not deny her origins. "The state government has interest in officially documenting these methods. Would you accept to participate in a technical publication?" Rosa nodded positively, knowing that thus she would honor forever the memory of the man who had taught her to transform swamp into garden. The report in the newspaper O Estado de São Paulo crowned her trajectory with official recognition. True triumph is not in hiding humble origins, but in honoring them through the greatness conquered. Rosa Benedita Silva Oliveira turned 50 on a golden morning in January 1900. Standing in the same place where she had received the land that's worth nothing 16 years before, she contemplated the empire her hands had built. The twins, now 8 years old, ran among the plots under Isabel's care, who had found in the children's education a new reason to live. The former haughty sister-in-law had transformed into a loving grandmother, redeemed by work and generosity. Tomás approached carrying a package carefully wrapped in fine fabric. "Birthday gift," he smiled, handing her a portrait painted by an artist from São Paulo. The image showed Rosa in her navy blue dress, but in the background the painter had captured the essence of her achievement: the organized plots, the flowering school, the workers' houses. "It's beautiful," she murmured, "but someone is missing." In the lower margin of the painting, Rosa commissioned the same artist to add a second figure, Benedito Silva, hat in hand and serene smile, pointing toward the plots he had helped create. "Now it's complete," she whispered, embracing the portrait against her chest. The afternoon brought special visitors, 3 families of former slaves requesting work and housing. Rosa received them on the porch, observing in the marked faces the same dignity she had recognized in Benedito. "There is room for all," she said simply. "Good land multiplies when it is well cared for." While the sun set, tinting the 50 conquered alqueires with gold, Rosa sat in the chair that had been Benedito's. The children played in the garden. Tomás tuned his guitar. Isabel told stories to the school children. The woman who had transformed scorn into dignity, abandonment into hope, whispered to the wind that carried the perfume of the flowering IP trees, "Benedito, my teacher, your land finally bloomed."